Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good night, whenever you're watching this. I want to welcome you again. This is the first lecture. Right off the bat, I want to say I'm not going to lecture through all these slides. I'm going to just kind of skip through. A lot of them have very basic information. This is just kind of an intro to food and agriculture as we go through. But before we get started, I want to say an official, again, welcome. It's been a pleasure to see all your flip grids. Wow, what a great looking class. Great diversity in majors. A lot of dog lovers. Some sports enthusiasts, glad to see. And outdoors. A couple computer science and business. Got some sociology, psychology, anthropology. With dietetics, nutrition. So a good spread, a great diversity of thought that's going to go into this class from your various perspectives. I haven't decided if we're going to do most of our discussions on Flipgrid or in the old-fashioned way on Blackboard with prompts and typing it in. We'll probably do a little of both, and some will just simply be your responses. As I said, I'll let you know as we go. So hopefully by now you've taken the pre-assessment. It looked like 70 of you had. I think there's 77, so you should be. But if you did not, I had extended. If you had trouble getting in today, I extended the date. It was really an error on my part. I put for tonight midnight, but of course when I put 16th, I put midnight. Anyway, it was last night. So it's now until tomorrow evening, 11:30, if you have not. And it's real important we get that data. It's something that we turn in to the university. So we'll take a similar one to it at the end of the course. So I just want to kind of set the tone. I'm super excited because you guys listening to your majors, whether it be wildlife conservation, education, business, criminology, each of you are going to play a role and a part in many people's lives, particularly your own. And the choices you make will influence those around you, namely your family. In your family, of course, it resonates from there. So as I mentioned before, beginning to look outward, kind of having that public affairs vision, that is the mission of Missouri State University, and bears that outward, not just here and keeping it for our own, but being able to use the gifts and the talents and the brains that you have to help fellow man as well. And really, in the crisis we're in globally, with the point of adding to the conversation our input, your ideas toward a solution. Requires a historical context. So this first week or two, actually the first 3 weeks, will have a historical context and just seeing what that primary human need is. And that has always been, life is centered around food. You probably have got your coffee ready or your energy drink, something to keep you awake through this. And then you have a snack or your cookies, if you're like me, coffee and cookies, maybe milk, right? We eat food. Now, we have the luxury here in America, for the most part, that we have so many choices. We've never had choices like we have today. You get more choices in those 3 coolers on your way to pay gas at Walmart than a lot of people have had in the last 30 years. So anyway, primary human need is food, right? And so a little historical context about how culture and society got to where it is, and the role agriculture played in that. Again, this could be a whole course in itself. So this is really just a basic go through of slides. So you should probably have these already looked at or printed out. We'll go through this one. The more important lecture will be the next one for thought and for the discussion. So the two of these together will go towards some discussion. This discussion will be on Flipgrid as well, where you'll share your thoughts for this week, and then we'll get into the routine of the topic for the next 3 weeks after this. So what does everyone need from food? United Nations has said 75% should come from carbohydrates. You have 15% coming from your fats, 10% coming from protein. These are recommended, just like USDA puts out recommended guidelines. They're not rules. People are different. Demands are different depending on your lifestyle and so forth. But always the best is a varied diet. right? Too much of the same thing. There's a couple picky eaters, or at least one picky eater she admitted for us. When you're picky, that's fine, so long as you have a good diversity of foods that you're picky for and about, then you can feed on that. But what we're talking about for the most part, those carbohydrates, these are your starchy foods, the staple crops everyone depends on: potatoes, grains, breads, corn, rice. These are complex carbohydrates. And what they are a lot of simple sugars. So this is glucose. If in your biology class you learn C6H12O6, this is one glucose molecule right here. You link several of them together, you have a complex carbohydrate or a polysaccharide. So these last a little longer than very simple sugars, which can be burnt up very quickly. Your body's smart and it'll try to use those simple sugars first, and it begins to store up the more complex. And that's, whoops. All right. But this is the most important source of energy for metabolism. It's very readily available. Cells recognize it, breaks down very quickly, gets it in there, and this is what's used for cell respiration and the formation of ATP, right? And that's the energy currency of your body. So carbohydrates are very important for immediate and for long-term energy, depending on whether they're simple or complex. Fats, of course, also store energy. Many more bonds and fat molecules, glycerols, fatty acids, triglycerides, more bonds, more energy, right? However, these molecules are a little more difficult. They're a little more stable. So it's kind of like coming home from school or work, and most of us will probably walk straight to the cabinet, maybe the refrigerator, eat the leftover pizza way before we ever open the freezer and try to defrost the steak and start boiling potatoes, right? Steak and potatoes are much more nutritious for us, and they're going to taste better, but it takes longer to get there, and we got to tame the savage beast, right? So we go for the Oreos and chips or whatever it is. Once that's down and we're good, we can start thinking about real dinner. So fats are that real dinner sometimes. Now this particular example is not the real dinner. Hopefully these are the fats and the not so healthy fats, but triglycerides are quite common. These are for energy storage. Your body will break these down and get some good out of it. So linoleic acid or linolenic are two good forms of fats, and there's many different kinds. But these are essential, and they come from some animal fats. Fish oils and such are also healthy. And then the third big one is protein. So proteins are made up of amino acids, and we need those amino acids. So what we do is we don't typically need cheese or scrambled eggs on our thighs or on our chest, right? But we need the molecules that make up those eggs and cheese and whatnot. Your body metabolizes that, breaks them down to their constituent amino acids, and puts them back together in the form that your body can use it. Right? So it's necessary for all movement muscle. Proteins do everything in the body. It's a functional workhorse of your body and of your cells. And you can find some good healthy proteins and fats both in meats and nuts and such. So the difference between essential and non-essential amino acids. Essential amino acids are those that you need to eat. All right. Non-essential, your body makes them. So it's not essential that you eat them because your body can synthesize them. So there's about 20 amino acids. 9 of those are essential. All right, and the other 11 are non-essential. So foods that you can eat that make up, say, or get would be like animal fats or animal proteins. Animal proteins will give you all the essential proteins you need. Plant-based proteins lack at least one or more, except for, say, soy or quinoa. They would have all of them. But if you have a varied enough diet, legumes, grains, vegetables, you can probably get a complete set of your essential amino acids out of the 20 from the 20 that you need. But variety is always key to that. Vitamins and minerals, you'll find these supplemented in a lot of energy drinks. Coca-Cola, RC, anything with caffeine and sugar is going to give you an energy boost. The caffeine will make you alert. The sugar gives you a little bit of energy. Of course, too much of either one of those, and it has a reverse effect. That's not good for your health. But best energy drinks, I would say, are anything that if you're going to put the demand on your body, you might as well give yourself some of the tools it needs to perform what it needs to. So vitamins, there are some water soluble and fat soluble ones. Vitamins A, E, D are fat soluble. Vitamin C is a water soluble. Did I say A was fat soluble? Yes. Beta carotene. So here's beta carotene, retinol. So you have this breakdown. Vitamin A, this would be a lipid-based vitamin. These details you don't particularly need to know. Just kind of running through. I'll get carried away sometimes off topic. Well, here's a good example of some of the minerals. Calcium and phosphorus for bones and teeth. Calcium and sodium for pH maintenance, very important. Calcium's at the heart of a lot of your physiology. Your heart, your muscle contractions actually require a lot of calcium. Regular heartbeat requires a healthy dose of calcium. If you're going to lack calcium, I'm sure your muscles and heart will get its own. Your nervous system and cell signaling requires a lot of calcium. All this is calcium. So the first place you'll probably see it missing if it's, let's say a malnourished person or someone who's not eating correctly, or is going to be in the bones and teeth, just because they're not vital parts, right? Well, you can't live without bones probably, but you can probably live without teeth, but you see it usually teeth, hair, skin when you're at a lack of calcium or something like that. Iron for binding oxygen. Not enough iron, you may be anemic. Iron deficiency anemia. Enzyme cofactors in the diet. Zinc, selenium. We have enzymes that work, but when these cofactors are present, they work more efficiently. So it's just optimal health for an active, healthy lifestyle. You want these vitamins, you want these minerals, and they come in various quantities with various vegetables. Okay, so what everyone gets from food, this is generalized dietary content in Ecuador compared to the US. So what is available to us? We have a lot of carbs, right? Obtained from local sources. What do we grow here? A lot of corn, a lot of wheat, make a lot of bread. This is very available. Not as much time. If you look over here, and you have 21% are carbohydrates, and you have 50% animal or protein, assumed to be then animal. You got to think about what's around us. So getting that balanced diet, which one of these, I'm sorry, I'll go back real quick. Which one of these is closer to that original slide that we showed? 75% carbohydrate, 15% fat, 10% protein. And you look at this and you can see, of course, US is much closer to that recommended. Ecuador needs some help getting there. All right, so I'm going to just kind of come through. Of course, agriculture products can vary anything when you talk about cotton, clothing, when you're talking about wood or growing orchards, say walnut, black walnut, or pine or oak for shelter. Food is a given for ag. Globalization equals interdependence. So we saw that pie chart of Ecuador in the US, and now I just kind of look at the stats where we are. Globalization, interdependence. I don't want to say a lot, but hopefully you've kept up with your, in some form of social media or Facebook or news source, whether it be CNN, Fox, NPR, Washington Post, New York Times. In fact, so here's just some headlines. And I want you to read through these, such as European interest in US beef remains strong. Quota problems are limiting exports. So meeting the higher demand of middle meats as some people become more affluent, that is, as they earn more money and income, they tend to eat more meat. And so that drives the market. Supply woes. Brazil cuts into U.S. soybean market share in China. But just to set the tone for globalization and the interdependence, this slide here shows some of that. If you look at the yellow and green arrows coming out of America, we are primary suppliers of corn. We are primary suppliers of wheat. So these are large centers of production. All right. So I have here a center of production is a geographical region where the production of a particular crop is especially high. So there's several regions of production. And you can see here also coming out of Canada, North America. So a lot of South America, a lot of Africa is supplied by us. Europe helps supply some of North Africa. And we're just shipping it everywhere, feeding the world. So if you go to this graph, net exporter, you'll see that these countries are growing enough to send out to other places. These places are not able to grow or don't have the technology or at least the infrastructure or the knowledge of how to for farming, and therefore must import, must purchase, must supply. So there's trade there. We do have items that we buy. Rice, coffee are two that we import a lot of from other places. So there's these trade-offs. So most agriculture occurs in and around these global green belts. These are centers of production. So you can follow the global map here and you see the United States, Mexico. You see lower South America. We have a lot of potatoes here. This is where the potato actually derived from originally. There's Europe. So, and then you have these vast kind of maybe food deserts. And some of those food deserts are getting larger and they need more help supplying food for there. So this is a real interesting graph here, worth taking a little bit of time to look at. It displays the full matrix of linkages. Say as an example, Central America is represented in orange. So here's Central America at the top. And the orange line represents the amount of regional food supplies derived from crops native to that region. So something that grows in Central America that originates is corn. Teosinte originated in Central America and Mexico. And you can see it's a very large orange bar and represents, of course, a large food supply derived from that region. Beans, cassava, eaten in different regions of the world. So you can try to follow those lines and you see tropical South America. Anyway, pretty difficult. Those are small lines there. You have to maximize it. Here's North America. And we supply a lot of temperate South America. Anyway, it's a wicked looking web. This is another good picture. Regions of diversity. So North America has blueberries, strawberries, pumpkin, sunflower seeds. So we have a lot of these fruits across here. A lot of things you think originated here did not. Again, you can see the corn. Such came from Mexico and South America. The potato came from deep South America, Peru. So take a few moments to look and just see where your food might be coming from. Obviously, we've been able to adapt a lot of these foods as well. So when we say regions of diversity, this is not the same as regions of production. Okay, production, we might produce a lot of corn. We probably produce the most corn. We just saw that in the last graph. Where was it? Here it is. We just saw that in this graph. We produce a lot of corn, but corn did not originate here. So when you look at regions of diversity, this is where they have the most diverse forms of corn, and usually find that diversity in its region of origin. So diversity is many different forms of crops that can be found in a single in a region of diversity. The wild type, which is non-cultivated, relative of a crop, has genetics that cultivated types don't. If it's cultivated, it's been cultivated to have that particular genotype or gene set, so it has the traits that we want, right? So it lacks particular genetic diversity, but it does contain just that genetic set that we want for food consumption, whether it be better because of the nutritional value or because it's disease resistant, pest resistant, lasts longer on the shelf, things like that. Landrace is varieties developed by the local farmers through selection over time. That has to be done locally. The pressures that we have from the environment in Missouri are different than the pressures you'll have in New York or in Arizona or California where they're growing. So we have cultivars, landraces, that are diversified and been bred specially for those regions, so those growers can grow and supply food. So our food sources are mostly local. And just this is a good, interesting hit. Let's see, I'm at 21 minutes. Nikolai Vavilov. Read through this slide. What I want you to note is Vavilov's theory of the center of origin of cultivated plants. Again, center of origin is where you will find the most diversity. So in his world travels during his time, he found what he thought were about 8 to 11 centers of diversity for various crop origins. So on the PowerPoint, I left you an abstract from a paper recently written. So some others, Kim Hummer is reporting on research that was done. So what they've done in his time, now this was in the early 1900s. So he went around and discovered that the greatest diversity of plants, that is a genetic source for different kinds of plants, what we call points of origin, are being looked at now today. And so we can compare what is there now in year 2019 compared to what was there in the early 1900s, and how has that changed over time. And we get a really good picture of the health because we can take into account man-made environmental issues, climatic. We can also take a look at our growth and the habitat. So read this little abstract down here in light of Nikolai Vavilov and his theory of the center of origins of cultivated plants. We'll come back to that later in the term. I better close up. This has been a long lecture. I'm going to try to keep them between 15 and 20 minutes.